What's up, everyone? This is Josh. I'm bringing you my second place regional deck profile from Karlsruhe. I played pure Despia in like my first regional in like 2 years or something. And I figured I'd make a profile for all the people going to Hartford, talk a little bit about what I liked and what I didn't like. Before we get into the profile though, shout out to my team E-Man Games. I don't know which channel you're seeing this on. It's probably going to be on both the E-Man Games channel and my own channel. Either way, both links are going to be in the description below. But without further ado, let's get into the list. I did play, like I said, pure Despia, so triple Aluber, triple Tragedy, and one Adlib for my Despias. Triple Tragedy because I am on the Allure version. I think that's pretty handy in this build. No Adlib, no Comedy, and no Dramaturge because I really did never need Dramaturge in testing. Never came up for me. Comedy's nice, but I don't think there's enough reason to main it, simply because it's at its best in like skill drain matchups and stuff. And yeah, I was really happy with those 7. Not much to say about them. Triple Albaz to play around Ash on Branded Fusion, because if you hard draw Albaz and you have access to a polymerization, you can go into Lebellion that way. This has been pretty standard, I feel like, recently. People started with playing 2, but have moved to 3 pretty quickly. Triple Edgem Chain, 1 Albion, 1 Merc, and 1 Kit. I really wanted to play multiple Albions. I've talked about this on stream. I couldn't bring myself to do it because I was already on 43 cards, which I'm not happy with. I was fine with it for the regional because it was like a testing ground, but I knew very well that 43 was not going to be, like, it was not going to feel optimal, but there was just a lot of cards that I wanted to try, and that's why I was fine with bringing it to a regional, and that's why I kept it at 1 Albion at the end, but I will, talk about this card when we talk about potential changes at the end. 1 Merc, even though I do run Allure, I think you don't need to run multiple Mercs, because Merc is one of those cards that is only really strong if you draw it together with Allure, or if you can already play and make a fusion with an Albaz on it. And both of those scenarios, I feel like, don't really justify playing multiple Mercurius. It's kind of like a win more card. I can see playing 2, but I would never, I don't think I'd ever play 3. I was happy with the 1 though. And then the 1 Kit is my only other branded lost target next to these 2 and obviously Albaz. The reason I chose this one is that it is a starter itself. I didn't want to add many bricks. Like I said, Despia is already such a tight deck, already has problems getting the 40 cards. And there's so many potential one-offs that you can play to make your searchers like more flexible, right? You can play more Despias to make your Tragedy searches more flexible. You can play multiple different lost targets to make branded lost and Mercurior be more flexible. You can run tons of different spells like the Despian Theater and stuff like that to make your Aluber more flexible. But at the end of the day, you really need to decide on what you think is necessary and what is like kind of nice to have and really not needed to actually win games. And I figured stuff like Ecclesia, stuff like Dramaturge, stuff like Comedy, and also some of the spells, which we'll get to, weren't necessary. And I really don't want to go into like one of those 45 cards abominations, or even more than that, right? And I played 1 Snow, which is really, really good, especially with triple Tragedy. I would very often resolve Tragedy before using my branded fusion, and then I would prioritize sending Snow to the graveyard and make Albion, which was really, really nice. Just another nice form of interaction on the opponent's turn. Branded spells, triple fusion, triple opening, double red and 1 lost, 9 total, no theater, like I said, never miss it in testing, and also not at the regional. Double red is debatable, we'll talk about that at the end. I was happy with 2, but in combination with more Albions, I think it's reasonable to play 3, because Albion plus branded in red, you send Fallen of Albaz with Albion and get into your plays that way if your branded fusion gets ashed, which is neat. Triple Allure, people who've been watching my stream know that I've been on this card for like weeks now. I told, like, literally, I think the second stream of me playing Despia after learning the deck on the first stream, I was like, why are people not running Allure in this deck? Really, really good card. People don't really realize that you don't need to draw this card together with Tragedy or Merc. It is also just a good deck thinning card. If you draw it with any of your other monsters, you can like get rid of duplicate Albazes, duplicate Edgem Chains, duplicate Alubers, whatever. Deck thin, get to your more important cards. And if you ever draw it with Tragedy or Merc, it's just really, really good. Triple Patchwork. So as you can see, triple Patchwork, triple Edgem Chain. I went really hard on this engine. Going into the regional, I felt like I want to open this every single game. Which in theory you do really want to see these in every single game, but I also have to say that the hands that I did brick, which it did happen to me this tournament, my only loss was actually to me pretty much bricking twice when going first. The one game I did get ashed on Branded Fusion and couldn't play after. The other game I just hard bricked and went like set edge and chain without even without them even needing to hand trap me. So going forward, I do think you like to draw these cards, but if you cut this deck down to 40, I think you can go lower on some of these. Then double poly, you'd never want more. This is like the one out of this engine that you don't want to see. Something special about my list is, some people do this, but I played triple droplet and triple super poly main deck. Super poly I think is kind of self-explanatory at this point. Despia is so popular and it's actually pretty good in other matchups as well, and it's such a blowout card going first and second usually that there's really no reason not to play it. It's a huge blowout in this meta. Is super frustrating to go against with this deck as well. Like whenever I go first, I'm like so afraid they might have super poly, which is like actually one of the reasons why this deck, it feels so powerful, but there's like so many cards you lose to, which made it feel like gambling a little bit. I feel like one of the reasons I did well at this regional was that I got hit by these cards relatively infrequently. Like, you know, the super polys, the D-barriers, the anti-spells, they all happened. But I was lucky enough that they usually only happened like once a match. So I lost one game to them, but I could win the other two games. I feel like if you play this deck, you need to be prepared to, you know, sometimes get really frustrated when they happen multiple times a match. But yeah. The reason I played Droplet is because I felt like this Despia version without hand traps has been the most popular by like a mile at this point. Like everyone I've been seeing on Despia has been playing this at the regional. And because of this, I think Brave players should be back on Scythe right now. Because if you're not getting hand trapped, you can pretty much Scythe this deck every time and you pretty much win all the time. And that's what Droplet is really good for. Didn't end up working out for me. The card was not bad or anything, but the one Scythe player that I faced paired the Scythe with Herald, so that didn't really work out. I couldn't Droplet the Scythe in that case, so you know, card wasn't bad, but didn't really do what I put it into my deck for, which was outing Scythe. But you know, it is what it is. One called by, card should be banned, no discussion. One Gold Sark. I think the Gold Sark is better than putting a second Merc, because like Merc is only good if you have a way to remove it from play with like Allure and stuff, which then is really good. But if you just have Gold Sark instead of the Merc, you can just banish the Merc or the Tragedy and just get going that way. I did still run the Branded Sword, so Gold Sark onto Merc, add Albion, send Sword, add back Merc is still just the easiest +1 ever, and is not dependent on you having Allure or anything. So before adding another Merc, if you don't run Gold Sark, consider adding Gold Sark for this. And like I said, the one Branded Sword, even with just one Merc and one Gold Sark, I figured it was worth it because I wasn't really too afraid of hard drawing it. It does hurt your consistency a little bit, but when you hard draw it and you can play, you can like pitch it for Super Poly, for Droplet, for Albaz, for Lubellion going first. It's been okay. I drew it a couple times. I sided it out a lot, and I did resolve it to add back like the Merc a lot. It was decent. It's one of those cards that is cuttable if you want to move closer to 40 cards though, which I'll talk about that once we go through the side and the extra deck, is what I would do to this to make it 40 cards and then any additional changes as well. Extra deck is standard to an extent. I ran triple Albion because like I said, I prefer the snow route a lot when going first. And when you go for that route, you usually banish one and then you send one for Mirror Jade, so you really want the third one in the extra deck. Not really up for debate for me. What is up for debate though is two Lubellions. I think this was wrong. I wanted to play one. Some of my friends convinced me to play a second one because they were like, yo, you need it in grind games and such. I never needed the second one. Like I said, I made this on turn one like majority of the times. And even if I did make this one, it went back into the extra deck. I really had no games where I needed a second one. I think this one should not be here. Double Mirror Jade, double Chimera. This is pretty standard and should be. Double Masquerade. Considered going down to one, but really happy I went with the second one. My consideration of going down to one was when I preferred to go for Dragostapelia on turn one, like a setup of like Mirror Jade, Dragostapelia, and Branded in red. But against this version of Despia, which everyone's running now, I feel like the Dragostapelia is just not likely to stop them from playing, which is why in the mirrors I preferred this opening anyways, the Masquerade and the Mirror Jade with like an Branded red set. I did not summon the second Masquerade right away sometimes. I mean, with broken hands, you can already put it up on your turn, but like an average hand will not. And then if you have the Brandon Red set, you let them play, and they have to do like so many effects with like allures and such. You let them pay a lot, and then you decide on how the turn's going. You'll decide on either going for the Chimera on their turn, or you'll go for the second Masquerade. Which honestly, if this deck goes head to head in a mirror match, it's really hard to win going second against Masquerade. It's really hard to win going second in general without blowout cards like Super Poly. But yeah. Still run the Dragos Topelio, of course, is like the thing you summon the most with Super Poly, I feel like, especially in the mirror. It's just so good. Definitely still at least a one of. Queritus is also mandatory because it makes Super Poly very nice against Sword Soul. If they have like Baronne Shishao, you like Super Poly the Shishao, and then you force the Baronne by reducing it to 0. It's pretty nice. Proskinian, never made it. This is also a flex spot. Wouldn't straight up say you should cut this. It never came up for me. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's really useful for OTKing, which is why I put it in. I think it's a decent card still, but in this regional it did not come up for me. And then I only ran one like Albas special summon fusion, which is the Brigand. Never really missed any of the others. I don't think you need like Titaniclad to beat over big things, because you can also do that with the Ad Libitum on field effect, which not everyone knows about, but this can also buff your board bigger than like the Ad Ignister or something like that. So I never really missed it. I never really missed like a second Albas special summon in the end phase either. This is fine. So what you do with this slot is pretty much up to you. There's a couple of things you can do, like Super Poly targets and such. Haven't really decided on what this slot should be, but it definitely shouldn't be a second Lebellion. Side deck. I was pretty happy with that side deck. The only card I never really used was the Token Collector, simply because I didn't face Sword Soul. I put it in against like a Brave deck, but it doesn't really do that much in the matchup. It was okay, but you could cut this for like other cards. I have a suggestion for what I would do with this slot maybe as well, but yeah. I sided one Comedy. Like I said, I didn't feel like it was impactful enough to main it, but as a side deck card, I really like it, because you just dedicate one slot to this card and it's single-handedly going to win you the skill drain matchups, which it did do that a lot for me. Well, I played one skill drain matchup and I completely destroyed them when they opened skill drain with this card, which is really nice, where you just go like, you search it with Tragedy, or you straight up send it with Branded Fusion. You have it in the grave, you go for a Guardian Chimera, and then activate the effect and tribute it for Comedy, so it goes under skill drain. And it's really, really nice, pops their back row and such, and yeah. One Banshee, and I played triple Zombie World, which one is standard. I believe the minimum you should be running is 2, for the simple reason that if you draw a Zombie World, you can do something really nice, which is you activate Zombie World and you still send the Banshee to the grave. And because everyone is you're running Cosmic Cyclone, if they have an out for your Zombie World, you simply put up the second one, because this is a quick effect. And because I thought this interaction was really neat, I put 3, because I wanted to maximize my chances of actually seeing the card, and then also being able to send Banshee to the graveyard and just lock them out that way. Which, if you only play one, that simply isn't possible. If you draw that one card, if they have a Cosmic, you can't use this to set up a second one. That's why I think 2 is the minimum. I went for 3, didn't face any flunders. Put this in against like some Dragon Links and stuff. It wasn't hugely impactful, but it wasn't terrible either in the matchup. Triple Twin, only back row removal. I like the fact that against Skill Drain, you're not really dependent on back row removal because you have Comedy. There's ways to play around Skill Drain with like Snow or Branded in Red, but those are way harder to set up. Like, you can't really search Branded in Red under Skill Drain, and getting to enough resources in Grave for Snow to be able to dodge a Skill Drain is also pretty hard. But yeah, these are also... I took Twin Twister because against Flunder, you really want to hit the field spell and the trap into the draw phase, and that's why Cosmic is not enough. Triple Barrier, biggest blowout card in the mirror matches, I feel like. Even put like 2 in going second, just in case you can like break their board but not kill, so you can prevent their follow-up turn. Also, in case you get debarriered, right, at least you can debarrier them back so they can't kill you on the follow-up turn. It's just a ridiculous card. And then one red reboot because, I mean, couple trap decks in the format, but also mainly for like debarrier and anti-spell and stuff like that. So that's the main deck. Well, that's all the decks actually. I was pretty happy with it. I do think Despia feels a little bit like, you know, a little gambly this format, because the deck is so powerful but also very linear that it gets floodgated relatively easily. You know, cards like debarrier, Cards like Anti-Spell, I got Anti-Spelled a ton. You know, the reason I did well was not that I didn't get hit by these cards. I was just lucky enough to only get hit by these cards like once a match usually, and was able to win the other two games. But it did feel I had to do like a lot of praying during the regional. I was like, I would go first in game threes and make my board and be like, yo, please don't have Super Poly. Or my opponent would go first in game three and be like, yo, please don't have Barrier, or I literally lose on the spot. And that's something I didn't really like. But whenever we got to actually play the deck, it was pretty cool. Now to what I would actually change to make this 40 cards. Like I said, I put Droplet in to combat Scythe decks mainly. It wasn't bad in other matchups, but I don't think it justifies going over 40 if people actually, like, if people are smart and know that this deck plays no hand traps and only droplets potentially to beat Scythe. I think you can just go full combo versions again and just make Scythe together with like a Herald. It isn't like the biggest deal in the world to do that, and that makes this card kind of invalid. I feel like you just have to hope in that case that you do win the die roll against these hardcore combo Scythe decks, and that's why I would take this card out, which would already make the deck 40. I have a couple other changes though, because I would really like to play, going forward, I'd really like to play these 3 cards, which is 3 Albions to make this deck maximum consistency. Like, because this is technically an Upstart Goblin, you can only use one of it per turn, but you have a lure to get rid of multiples, and you can just fuse away multiples too. I think that's fine. Talked about this on stream a lot, just really couldn't really pull the trigger, you know, of actually playing it at the regional, but I think I should have. Paired this with a 3rd Branded in red to play around Ashron Branded Fusion, which is really nice. If you open these two together, you send Albaz, and then, you know, Branded red is immediately live. Cards I would take out, definitely either an Ejim Chain or a Patchwork, depending on what you prefer to have as a 3-off, or even both. In 40 cards with triple Allure, triple Albion, I think it's reasonable to go 2 and 2. If I only wanted to cut one, I'd probably say the Ejim Chain, because it's more likely to brick, right? Because if you draw this in your opening hand, it at least gets you a poly, which makes this combo together with like Tragedy, for example, which I had hands with Ejim Chain and Tragedy that couldn't play. My only loss was actually to like a Brave Dragon Link version, which game 1 I went first, they ashed my Branded Fusion, I couldn't play. Game 2 they didn't even need a hand trap, I just went set Ejim pass because my hand was like Ejim, Tragedy, I don't remember, Zombie World, and 2 other cards that didn't do anything, so I actually couldn't play. So that's like the only issue with this deck is, you know, bricking when going first, or getting like hit by super impactful cards like D-Barrier, Fragrance, or Super Poly. But yeah, and this helps with none of those problems, right? It's just like a good card in general, but it doesn't help with those problems. So one of those or both. Then if you run triple Albion, I think it's reasonable to take out the Gold Sark, because it makes the Gold Sark way less, you know, way less good if you can't just Gold Sark for a Merc search Albion, because you've already used Albion. It's kind of awkward. It can still send Tragedy, but then again, same thing with Tragedy. If you use it with Gold Sark to get a search off of it, you can't then later on banish it with a lure, or you can't send it with Branded Fusion, or you can't discard it for opening. And I feel like you don't need this for consistency if you go to 40 cards with triple Albion and triple Allure. And then the other option to cut is obviously Branded Sword. This card is not mandatory. It's kind of like just nice to have, but you can take this out. So what I would suggest, if you want to play this deck going forward, obviously with Dimension Force coming out, there's some other changes you can consider. Like, I do think the trap card is pretty good. But for now, what I take away from this regional is don't play Droplet, and take out 3 of these 4 cards for these 3. That's what I would do. Other than that, I was pretty happy with it. I mean, I went X1. I'm pretty happy with how my, you know, comeback tournament went. I'm really happy about getting 2nd place. I got a little lucky with the tiebreakers because there was like 4 or 5 people X1. I had the best tiebreakers. That was kind of neat. Other than that, I don't really have anything else to say. You know, if you haven't seen it yet, I am live on Twitch a lot since Master Duel's release. I'm streaming Master Duel and TCG. And I'd really appreciate it if you checked it out. I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. And I hope you enjoyed the deck profile. And that's it for now. And I'm out. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.